Hello and welcome to This Week at the Movies. I'm Matt,
And I'm Eric.
and we are 3 weeks deep into summer movie season, and we are very excited to be back talking about the big blockbusters that have so far dominated the early part of the month. It is a month of blockbusters, and that kicked off, right the beginning of May with The Fall Guy, which was came out officially May 3rd. I think I actually went to the preview screening on May 1st. It almost feels like it was a different year ago because so much happens in May. But Ryan Gosling plays a stuntman here. This movie shares a title with a 1980s TV show that they definitely reference by a couple of cameo appearances and by some of the names of the characters, but it really does not follow the premise of that TV show. So they used that as inspiration. The TV show was about a movie stuntman that became kind of a private detective. In this case, Ryan Reynolds, a pretty good stuntman. He has something going with a camera operator played by Emily Blunt. Then an accident sort of takes him out of commission for a while. He gets called back into action on a movie. He's used to stunt doubling for the world's biggest star, Tom Ryder, played by Aaron Taylor Johnson. And turns out Tom Ryder is missing, and he's ostensibly been brought to Australia to find him because his ex-girlfriend, Emily Blunt, this is her first big directing opportunity, and they need to keep things on track. This one was directed by David Leitch, who is himself a real-life stuntman, also worked on movies like John Wick, so definitely knows his way around an action sequence. Winston Duke is in here. Hannah Waddingham is in here. I thought this was a lot of fun. I know it didn't exactly sizzle at the box office, but it was exactly what I was hoping for. My birthday is May 4th, so the first weekend in May is always a movie I look forward to because it's the start of summer blockbuster season. I want to see what present I'm going to be given. And I thought this was a kick for my birthday weekend movie. I'm giving it a thumbs up. I had a lot of fun with this one.
The Fall Guy was my number one most anticipated movie of the year. And that is because of how good Bullet Train is. That is the last one done by David Leitch. The one before that is Deadpool 2, which if you haven't seen the unrated extended cut of that movie, you get to see some action scenes that were chopped up turn into one takes, and you get to see a lot more of his creative process. And with his involvement in John Wick, I have no shame in saying that I feel like David Leitch is like one of the best working action directors at all. And I feel like you definitely get more evidence of that in this movie. I think he continues to prove that he is too good at delivering smaller stakes, well-paced, solidly delivered action set pieces. And I loved the whole cast here. The only thing I can say, I've heard some complaints about the chemistry between Emily Blunt and Ryan Gosling, and I can understand it, but I also think it's a consequence of them trying to write their scenes in a way too clever of a manner, and instead of just letting them have emotional moments together. They're trying to meta speak their way around the script while talking about each other. And it sort of, I think, gets in the way of the two actors getting to be themselves. And, it just might have been a little too clever for its own good. But I wanted to give this 2 thumbs up, but I'm only giving it 1 just because I've been absolutely blown away by movies that this guy has made before. So I see that this didn't come together the best, but The Fall Guy is to me a solid reminder that movie making is impossible. And just getting to see everyone bust out onto the field and the whole stunt team become the heroes of the story, and knowing that they actually broke the record for the barrel rolls in the car, and just so much about this is such a reminder of what an achievement it is to get a crew of thousands of people together to make a movie actually work, and then for it to work this well. It's like, oh man, like it's such a treat. Every time I see David Leitch's name, I'm gonna be flipping out. I think because even if this is like his okay, then I'll like take anything from him. Like,
Well, and one of the criticisms I've heard from some critics seems to be that they thought it was too kitschy, too inside, looking at the movie making process, making winks and nods to stunt making. I wonder if this is a case where there might be a disconnect between what people who are in the industry perceive about a story and what a general audience is going to perceive. Because honestly, even I mean, I knew they were talking about the filmmaking process, and they make some cloying references to stunt work not get in being in the Academy Awards, which we heard that actually at the Academy Awards. We've heard that from people talking about that for a while, but I guess I was more interested in the story and the action and the pieces, and I didn't think it was so much of a inside referendum on movie making. And I wonder if that has something to do with some of the tepid critical response. In terms of box office, I think it's just, it's hard to tell. I don't think anything's done spectacular this year. Dune 2, even, I mean, it did pretty well, but not quite the numbers we saw for some of the movies last year. I don't know if people are tired. They haven't really gotten into stuff yet. I know
yeah, we're
people
not back to
not totally out of
pre-COVID numbers.
school yet either.
Yeah,
You have graduations, you have a lot of competing interests going on at the beginning part of the month. We usually see some of the bigger, it feels like, blockbuster box office numbers starting Memorial Day weekend and back. Unless you have an established franchise, it's really hard. They compared year over year. I believe last year's first weekend of May was Guardians of the Galaxy 3, which is in a completely different setup in terms of the built-in box office that it brings, an audience that it brings. I thought this was fun, and I think most people that have seen it that I've talked to enjoyed it.
awesome.
Yeah. Well, we followed Stunt Madness with Monkey Madness. That's right. Last weekend's big release was Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, the fourth of the modern Apes franchise. This is the first one technically without Caesar, although he does appear at the beginning. So is it really without Caesar? But this one takes a huge jump forward in time where humans are very limited, and a lot of them have kind of reverted back, have lost the ability to have consistent language and a lot of human society due to the virus. Meanwhile, the apes have kind of built their society and, of course, divided off into factions, excuse me. And the action kind of picks up here. Eric, I haven't always loved the modern Planet of the Apes franchise, so I'll let you lead off. Did this one meet your expectations?
I've been thinking about this for a long time because of your opinions on these movies. And I think what has consistently happened is when I think of Planet of the Apes, I think in a very pretentious manner, feh. I think, oh, Planet of the Apes, what a concept, like apes rule the world. And so when a movie clears that very, like, this could be such a jokey, I mean, you think Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes, right? Like that's kind of what comes to my mind.
I try not to think of Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes,
right?
For being honest.
So when I think of a movie like that being like the face of a franchise, whenever something is able to make something feel so like human and have such emotional stakes and like be good, I feel like it's a higher praise. I feel like it's more difficult to be good being a Planet of the Apes movie, so it feels more impressive. But that's the thing. Like every one of these movies, I think, okay, maybe that'll be good. Oh, that was better than I thought. And then Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, my gosh, blew me away. Like I absolutely love that movie. And War for the Planet of the Apes has some glaringly bizarre character moments and choices, and there's a lot of like thoughtlessness in the character choices and stuff but still the emotional weight of Andy Serkis's performance and some of that stuff is all there. And I bring all of those movies up just because I'm very surprised that this really does feel, even though it's 200 years apart and they could have used this to abandon that original arc and reboot it for Disney, this feels like a successor to that trilogy. This feels very tied in with the values of that trilogy, and it feels like it is trying to show you something about the relationship, but well, just about humanity as a term in general. Like what makes us us and what makes us so entitled to our slot in like the hierarchy. What do you call it? The food chain, whatever. So, they just always make me think more than I think they're going to, and they're always slightly better than I thought. And I didn't want to spoil too much of this, but nobody here, like, I'm not too worried about spoiling it for anyone that I know or anything. So I sort of loved the way this one unfolded. I love the mistrust between, what is the main monkey's name? I know that's kind of a, you're muted.
Sorry, Noah.
Noah. And Noah and the one who's not named Nova, May, I think her name. Yeah.
Yep, May.
And I loved the tension in that. And I love the idea that they're going to explore it. And I love like I'm still so on board with this franchise. I don't know. Visual effects great, set pieces great, just enough tension, just enough heart. The motion capture performances are well done. I'm still loving the franchise.
So I'm guessing you're going thumbs up.
I am going 1 thumb up. They're not the greatest things ever made. Like
I feel like for me, I've gone on a little bit of an emotional roller coaster with this one. When I saw they were making another one, I couldn't have cared less. When I started watching this movie, I couldn't have cared less. I actually sort of enjoyed this. And then I found out that this is part 4 of a planned 9-film series. And that has sort of dampened my enthusiasm. They're like, yeah, we mapped out 9 of these when we started. And we thought, well, maybe that's overly ambitious. But here we are. We're making number 4 and people seem to love them. And I'm like, love is a stretch. So a couple of my criticisms of this is it hasn't, to me, felt like there's any continuity. Like if you were talking about it as a franchise, and I will acknowledge the first 3 movies all had Caesar. That was not a character that resonated or pulled to me. And the fact that you had different humans entirely and different starting points entirely in each of those 3 movies made them feel incredibly disconnected to me. And I'll say my intense dislike for War of the Planet of the Apes is actually one of the reasons that I was completely out on Matt Reeves taking over the Batman, because I thought his 2 Planet of the Apes movies were crap. So in some ways, for me, completely resetting the table actually worked. I enjoyed Owen Teague, who is the voice and everything of Noah, the motion capture, the main ape that we are invested in here. And I enjoyed Freya Allen, who plays May. There were some interesting, side characters. I thought Kevin Durand did a decent job as the villain, Proxima Caesar. I actually enjoyed kind of the scholar Raka. He was voiced by Peter Macon, who, as soon as I heard his voice, I was really excited because he was on The Orville, which was Seth MacFarlane's ode to Star Trek that I dearly loved. He was Lieutenant Commander Bortus. I recognize, that voice is unmistakable. As soon as I heard it, I was like, all right, you may have won me over. So I actually did kind of enjoy this and where it's going. My question, so you talk about the potential of the future of them exploring this dynamic between these two. That potential exists, but what about this franchise leads you to believe that they will pick up there with the same characters. That's a minor trepidation. I'm going to give this one thumbs up because I thought it worked for what I think it was a little too long, but it is
Yeah.
2.5 hours. I liked the shots that they had that are very much a nod to the Charlton Heston movies when they're on the beach, and some of the sequences and some of the way that set is set up is very much a nod to classic Planet of the Apes from the 60s. I thought that was a nice touch. I, I liked what they were putting down here. If you told me we were going to continue on in this, I might be mildly interested. If you told me we're getting one of these people back and then a completely new set of humans, which is honestly a concern for me because at the end she brings this thing to a group of humans, but she's not allowed in there, and they're all wearing suits, which makes you sort of wonder, is she screwed? Like,
Yeah.
her last
Well,
scene had a very last time you're going to see me in these movies energy to it, to me, that made me concerned because the humans have been completely disposable throughout this. And I think that's why, I actually kind of liked Rise of Planet of the Apes when it first came out. I was
oh,
very much invested in the James Franco, John Lithgow, Caesar dynamic that completely gets
mm,
flushed as you go forward. And then Jason Clark, Kerry Russell, Caesar is okay, completely gets flushed going forward. And you can miss me with anything about the Woody Harrelson character.
yeah.
Um, so, if we were talking about my ranking of the franchise, this is actually my favorite of the four, and then Rise, and then Dawn, and then Under a Pile of Rubble, War for Planet of the Apes. I take it you weren't a big Rise of the Planet of the Apes fan.
I actually was. I like that movie. I just have a high opinion of these movies. Like that, I don't quite put them in the status of other like big franchises that I like. Like I would, there's like the Dark Knight trilogy and the Back to the Future trilogy and stuff. I don't really think of like the Planet of the Apes trilogy as one of those. But
Maybe because I think it's because it's so disconnected. There isn't a huge continuity. I mean, there's some
I'm fine with
continuity
it.
between Dawn and War, but Dawn of the Planet of the Apes almost feels like a completely set apart
It does.
film from
It does.
Rise.
I
And
they
that's
need to
where it
be
started to.
they need to be a little more thematically connected if they're not going to be like actually connected by staying around the same time.
Well, and I was
But
surprised. It's been 7 years since one of these.
yeah,
War for Planet of the Apes was 2017, and it's been 13 years since they started this.
yeah, it's got its own history. It's like you
That's
don't
a
even have to go back.
pretty long, pretty long spread. Well, so what would if you were going to rank them? How would you rank the four?
So, oh, Dawn, this, Rise, War. But I want to say, you saying 9 movies, them saying 9 movies,
Yeah,
makes me in my gut immediately go with this, and this is going to be my prediction moving forward. This trilogy is going to be its own trilogy, but the end of this trilogy is going to show that the ship that left in Rise of the Planet of the Apes is coming back to Earth, and the last trilogy, 6 or 7, 8, and 9, is going to be a Planet of the Apes trilogy based on the original characters from the original movie.
and if they get to make all nine, what year?
I think they're going to at least get to 7. Because I think they're gonna. I think even if this starts to lose drastic amounts of money, they have that emergency exit button to pull of we're remaking Planet of the Apes to get just a little more money before they quit.
Yeah,
So
I mean, and you never know. It's ironically, this is the three movies we're talking about tonight. This is the one I like the least, and this is the one that's done the best at the box office.
well, I think that's going to be a thing this year because we got Memorial Day weekend coming up with
Oh,
your other favorite movie of the year. So I bet you that one's going to make a ton of money.
April films restored my faith in the movies. May films may drive me to drink. I don't know. Because we haven't even talked about the last weekend at May 31st, where it looks like a minefield. I don't know. Well, that brings us, we had stunt people flipping cars. We had apes uh, throwing each other off cliffs. Time for something a little lighter. And this third weekend in May gave us the latest film from John Krasinski. And I know you wouldn't expect something lighter from the guy that gave you A Quiet Place. But you know what? I'm going to say this had the same, to me, kind of energy in a beautiful focus of father daughter dynamic, completely different context. And that makes a lot of sense. That's something that would interest John Krasinski. Wrote and directed this movie, which focuses on kind of a 12-year-old girl played by Callie Fleming named B, who lost her mother to a chronic illness. Now her father is got an issue and going in for surgery. Father, played by John Krasinski. She's living with her grandma, played by Fiona Shaw. And while she's there at this kind of nice apartment building in New York, she sees a little doll-like figure that sounds an awful lot like Phoebe Waller-Bridge that catches her eye. She tails the little doll and her human companion, who looks an awful lot like Ryan Reynolds, to a place where she soon sees a giant purple monster named Blue, who is voiced by Steve Carell. I thought this movie probably won't be for everyone if you're looking for like a big kind of action-packed summer. But this is definitely a lot more family-friendly. This is a good movie, parents can go to with their kids. But it's not just a kids movie. There's a lot that resonated. I have to be honest, when I was watching this, the first thing that I thought of is Toy Story 3. Which is a movie that very much was interesting to kids, but had an arc about childhood and wonder and that which we lose as we become adults that was very much aimed at older adults. When you're sitting there in your, early 30s, surrounded by children in a theater crying, well, they're probably reporting you to some kind of a list. That's the life of a solitary film critic who has to go to some daytime showings of kids' movies. But this movie reminded me a lot of that Toy Story 3 in terms of the emotional resonance that I felt going through it. I don't know if younger audiences are always going to connect with some of that, but those were the pieces I liked. The twists in this movie weren't that shocking to me. I was pretty able to deduce that, but that didn't matter that much. I thought it was delightful. I'm giving it thumbs up. I love John Krasinski and his writing and his directing, and he actually gives a very touching performance at times in this. Your introduction to him in the hospital was nothing short of a delight. Ryan Reynolds is pretty delightful. All the voice acting is pretty fun. Callie Fleming, great in the lead role. It was nice to have just a sense of wonder at the theater. Every once in a while you get these movies, and I know sometimes people don't love them. It's the same way I felt about Mr. Megorium's Wonder Emporium. Sometimes you just love a brightly colored thing that hits you in the feels, and that's what this did for me.
Yeah. So what's your thumb rating? I
gave it
a thumb up. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I feel like this is a movie that adults can see and read something into it, but it is so made for children that it very much holds your hand and tells you what to feel. And that's why I'm not giving it 2 thumbs up. I feel like the imagination, the delivery of it, the way that it doesn't hold your hand when it comes to the little girl and what is reality to her. I mean, given some of the twists in the movie, like, it would be fair to question what has actually happened and not happened. But I don't think that's the point. I think it did happen in every way that matters. And I I I don't know. Like you said, John Krasinski, everything about him and what he delivered in the movie is great. I think it's very pointed that Ryan Reynolds is sort of dressed like John Krasinski. I feel like there's a reason for that, and that kind of tipped me off early about one of the twists. So, yeah, like it's so special of a movie for the right age, and I think it's absolutely fine for anybody else. So I solid thumb up. I think this was well polished too. Like trying to blend so many different aesthetics of the different ifs. Trying to blend all of those and managing to make it look as good as it does, I think is pretty cool.
And I hope more people get a chance to see it. I know a lot has been made that it didn't have a huge box office opening this weekend. But you know, what's curious to me is things just are not staying in theaters that long. And is that a so Fall Guy, the movie we started talking about? Do you know it comes to VOD on Tuesday? Tuesday.
No.
So things are just not staying in theaters as long, and I don't know if that's them catering to people got accustomed to just watching these movies in their homes during the pandemic, but it's going to be hard for us to return to pre-pandemic theater levels when you have Challengers, the movie that was out the weekend before Fall Guy, is already on VOD. It dropped on Friday. I mean, things are not really getting a long, and you might say a movie like that maybe isn't a blockbuster, but Fall Guy is a movie to me that demands to be seen on that kind of. I saw it next week.
Demands to be seen in a theater. Go see this in a theater. Go see the Fall Guy in a theater. Like, if I also would say it's very theatrical, but I get it. If you have children and you want them to see it and you want to see it at home. And Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes,
That's
it's
another
a
one, very
technological
theatrical.
marvel.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's technological marvel. Great. But if you had to pick one that the most value you're going to get out of it is going to come from a theater, it's the Fall Guy.
Yeah.
Like, I'm so upset to hear that. Like, give it what 6 weeks, right? How is 6 weeks that hard to give a movie? Like, okay.
Well, and especially what I find, I mentioned we obviously have a couple of marquee releases for Memorial Day weekend, but that first weekend, that last May 30, I don't know if we consider the first weekend in June or the last weekend in May, since Friday is May 31st, and literally there aren't any real marquee national releases because everything kind of got pulled out. You have a horror movie from Shudder that's getting a limited theatrical run before it goes on to streaming. You have a kind of biopic about a swimmer from Disney that's getting a limited release. There isn't a big wide release movie, so you might wonder if some of these movies will be able to pick up some more people a little bit further out in release, because people will be looking for something to check out. And then there aren't as many blockbusters in June. I actually think we're seeing a thinning now at the box office heading toward the rest of the year. I think this is us catching up. Well, no, even in July, you have a couple of tent poles and things, but if you look down, I think we're starting to see a thinning in the number of total releases going toward the end of the year as a result of the strikes that took place last year. That's why they bumped some things into this year, but you've seen continued projects having to bump back or even bump out because they're not done. Like, I feel like Kraven the Hunter has had 5 release dates in the year 2024. I'm not excited about any of them, but it still had them. So if you want to see some of these movies, I am hopeful that we will see them be able to stick around in theaters for a little bit longer. But I'm curious, if this VOD strategy and this moving to streaming, because that was the thing. Barbie did not come to streaming, I think, until, was it December, January, and Oppenheimer didn't come to streaming until just before the Oscars in February. those movies, you had to go see them in the theater for a long time, and I think that's what's been interesting about this move right now, because things are just dropping to streaming so quick now.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
well, that is a wrap on the big blockbusters the first 3 weeks. We'll be back next weekend with yet another blockbuster and yet another franchise film, Furiosa, a Mad Max saga.
And just to have a little bit of hope, okay? Chris Hemsworth as a bad guy. There is one movie he's done it before, and it's Bad Times at the El Royale. And any
Uh,
movie that does something Bad Times at the El Royale did is making a correct decision. We'll see how well they do with it. I think his makeup looks a little awful, but
I hate to burst your bubble. That's not the only time he's played a bad guy.
oh no, is there a bad one?
There is a terrible streaming film. I am now looking for it that was out last year called Spiderhead, where he was an
Oh
evil
right.
scientist. Yes. So, well, 1-1.
Well,
Not undefeated, but could be worse.
eh,
We will also, at a bare minimum, do a flashback to celebrate The Mummy, which I feel old as dirt. Turns 25 this year. I remember seeing that movie the summer I graduated from high school, so that's a kick in the old pants right there for me. But I love that movie, so I'm excited to talk about that, and we'll see what other treasures, if any, we decide to throw in there. It is a fun season, but Eric, I've missed you.
you
Glad,
too.
glad to be back talking about a couple of great films. We've
Yeah.
had a pretty solid run since the beginning of April. Let's hope that continues. Let's hope I'm more excited than I think I am going to be right now. I did do my homework, and for you, I did rewatch Fury Road. And fury is the right word to use to describe how I felt about that experience. But we will see how I feel about Furiosa in just a scant few days. Until then, we will see you guys all at the movie.